Hurricane Sally is blamed for at least 2 deaths. The Gulf Coast got hammered by rain and more flooding is expected to come. Charles Watson has the latest from Pensacola, Florida.
Hurricane Sally hitting the Gulf Coast hard, especially in places like Pensacola, Florida, where there is more than $29 million in damages. Cleanup there is underway with business and homeowners left to assess the damage, while more than 300,000 remain without power.
We're very thankful that we have a very well-built house. That it was a very scary situation.
Crews say it could take months to repair the damage done to the 3-mile bridge, which connects Pensacola and Pensacola Beach, after a barge slammed into it, destroying a large section. Meanwhile, the Florida National Guard is out with their high water vehicles, rescuing at least 100 people so far who were trapped due to rising waters.
I said, Jack, I don't want to die in the attic. And he said, we aren't going to die. He said, everything's going to be okay. And it was.
Yeah. And Florida isn't out of the woods just yet. As Sally moved out of Florida, the remnants of the hurricane continued to drop rain over portions of the southeast, causing major flooding. As the water trickles back down to Florida, the threat of even more flooding in the state is high.
All these bodies of water in Northwest Florida, you're probably going to see them rise and crest, and you could see even more flooding over the next couple of days.
At least 2 people died in Alabama from the storm, one from an apparent drowning and the second during storm cleanup. In Pensacola, Florida, Charles Watson, Fox News.